Welcome to Ascendle Unscripted, where we explore the tech shifts that matter most for software leaders and product builders. I'm Michael Cinquino, and today we're digging into one of the most important, misunderstood, and fast moving ideas in tech. What if your next user isn't a human being, but an AI agent acting on their behalf? We have two incredible minds: a Ascendle Unscripted first timer, Jeff Blankenburg, who spent 7 years evangelizing Alexa at Amazon and is now helping builders prepare for agentic systems, and Ascendle veteran Clint Edmonson, director of software engineering at Ascendle and strategic mind in enterprise architecture. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, setting the stage here, what's changing? Jeff, I'd love to kick things off with you. We talked a little bit offline about tech eating tech. Can you unpack a little bit of what you meant by that and how we're seeing it play out in things like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Alexa, and anywhere else you think is relevant?
Yeah, one of the great examples I see right now of tech eating tech is a Google search results page. If you look at what's happening today, lots of people are spending small fortunes on buying search engine optimization and making sure that their rankings list higher for the keywords they care about. But Gemini is sitting at the top of every one of those results pages. And as we look at the business Google's been in forever, it's selling access to those listings, making sure that what you want is right at the top of that page. But with AI moving to the top of that page instead, a lot of people are just reading that AI summary and taking an action. It provides links and access to whatever you may need in that result, and doesn't require you to go click through a bunch of links to figure out what the right answer is. It's already got it for you. It's a really interesting problem in the business, and I can go through many more examples of this, but that one really stands out to me as interesting.
Jeff, thank you for that. Clint, this feels like it could be another evolution of automation, or something more fundamental in how we're interacting with software. Do you feel that applies here? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'll plus one what Jeff just said. We go out and we use the internet search engines to search, but what we really want is the answer. What if someone could go out and search for us and summarize it and bring us back with the answer, right? We're short-circuiting a lot of time and energy that we have to spend to have to research just to get to the truth that we're looking for.
So, for my own very, very selfish, having really smart people in front of me question, the whole model is built on attention, right? The whole thing. So if you can find a way not to give a website, a platform, a news organization your attention, it would seem that those folks are not going to like that at all. Number one. Two, they're going to fight like heck to figure out a way not to do that. But from what both of you laid out here, it sounds like when you talk about agents, they're a layer in between that human beings' attention and that platform. So how does this play out? How does this work? Because like Google's not going to like that. They don't want. Wall Street Journal does not want my agent on the site. Like, it's funny because back tech eating tech, it's like, well, you guys can't use tech, like, on us, we can use it on you. But wait a second here, we actually. So what does that mean? What does that look? I know it's a big question, but having you two here is such a gift, and I want to leverage it as much as I can.
Well, I think it really goes back to, I mean, you hear the stories of Henry Ford, and while I don't know if this story is true, it's been repeated thousands and thousands of times, right? He had people asking him for faster horses. How do we solve this problem? I need to be able to move my products faster, and that's really the thing that they were asking for. And he said, I think cars can do a better job. Let's deliver cars instead. And I think that as we look at how these agents operate, independent users, let's just call them consumers. We're all strapped for time. I mean, try to get if you ever tried to schedule time with another adult, it's impossible. Everyone's too busy. They need 3 weeks notice, and then they're going to cancel last minute because something came up, right? So as you go through all of that and you look at how humans are existing, if there is a technology that allows them to spend less time doing some of the mundane stuff in their life, like looking up search listings or even shopping on Amazon. I know this is something else that came up in our conversation, but if you think about what agents can be, the weather has finally turned nice here in Ohio, and I realized I didn't have a good pair of sunglasses, and so I went on Amazon and I ordered a pair of sunglasses, and they came the next day, and it was great. But I went to Amazon because it was convenient and familiar and trusted and friendly. But I didn't really want to spend time. Like, it wasn't my goal to go spend time on Amazon and buy something. It was to have the utility of the sunglasses in my hands as quickly as possible. And so if we have agents roaming around providing service to individual humans that can do a lot of these things on their behalf, I can just say, hey, I need a pair of sunglasses like the pair I bought last time. Well, does it care how trusted Amazon is or what the variety of selection is? They want to go find a pair of sunglasses like the ones I've used in the past. Well, if you look at my context and my history, uh, it has 24 hours to shop around and look at every API, every place that might sell sunglasses and find the pair that makes the most sense for me for cost, for time, whatever it happens to be. And the interface that Amazon has built for humans is irrelevant again. So I think it's really interesting to think about how agents function in business. But when I start thinking about how those apply to humans and like direct consumers, I think it's going to be a big game changer for how a lot of these businesses operate.
Yeah, I'm going to go backward to go forward. Clint, so bringing it back to enterprise for just a second, if the user becomes an API call from an agent, not from a human, how does that impact the way that organizations design infrastructure, workflows, or even pricing? Guys, yeah, I see Jeff nodding as well.
Yeah. Short answer, it depends on how complex the enterprise is to begin with. If it's super simple, it may not make much difference. If it's complex, it's ripe for opportunity to make improvements and streamline things. Right. I want to back up though. That the question you just asked before that was, is what it was about. Attention is what has made the difference. What is the corollary to attention? It's time. We gave LLMs attention so that they could act and react, which gives us time back from having to do that work ourselves, right? So I'm delegating off time to other people so that it's the currency that we're gaining. So anywhere where you have people doing active tasks that take time, there's potential for gaining that back by distributing work to an autonomous agent so that we don't have to do it. So again, in the context of an enterprise, I've got, let's say, underwriters. I've got a bunch of insurance underwriters or claims adjusters that have to do a lot of manual steps. What can I do to let them delegate that off to an automated engine that can do some level of judgment and can actively listen or react to things as they occur, and they don't have to do it? So yeah, if the more complex it is, the process or the solution, I think the more opportunity there is for us to delegate off these thinking machines. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, so what does it mean for SaaS companies who've always built for human users? Now it's like moving that.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing this a lot now where people are starting to think about how they build their endpoints or separate APIs to be able to handle what an agent would look at, how it consumes. I mean, it's always interesting to me. This was a couple of years ago. We built a fake API that looked and behaved a lot like Five Guys restaurants. This has nothing to do with Five Guys, but we'll just use that as the example. And all we had done is built a simple endpoint. It didn't really do anything, but it would return values. And we let an LLM jump in and say, okay, I want you to build me an app based on this API. And it was able to pick it apart, understand the data types, understand the structure, and build a simple application that could completely consume that API. It immediately knew how to figure out what toppings went in milkshakes and what toppings went on burgers and how those were different. And so if you think about that from that time and attention perspective, right? I still think that there is a place for humans in all of this. I think there's a lot of people that will talk about how jobs are disappearing and how nobody's going to have anything to do. But I think it's very different than that. I think that the agents we see today, the AI we see today, enhances humans and makes them better at what they do. You think about every email you've ever written or document you've had to put together for a work proposal or whatever it is. You had to start from zero. Now I get to start from 80%. And I get to put my touch on that final 20%. I think that's the biggest impact that we're going to see across the board is just how much better humans can be in a shorter amount of time, buying that time back, like Clint said.
We talked about it pretty frequently on this show, augmentation. And what I'm hearing you say, Jeff, and Clint, you're nodding that it feels like we're in an augmentation phase. Who knows how long this will last? Like, Clint, can you maybe speak a little bit to what that phase might look like, through your lens?
And you say, how long will it last? I don't think it's going to go back. I think it's a leap forward that it will just change the way we operate and live our lives. I read a good quote today. I'm trying to think of how it went. Essentially, it's how good are we going to be? It just depends on how well you can vibe with your LLM that you're working with, right? If it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, if you ask a dumb question, you're going to be swirling around an answer that LLM can't help you answer. But if you know what you're looking for, you've got a really good chance of finding it, right? I think that another saying I've heard is like the best problem solvers are the ones who ask the best questions. And I think with an LLM to help augment you, if your intuition points you in the right direction and you're a great problem solver, it's just going to accelerate getting you to the final answer you're looking for, or the, the solution you're trying to build. Or even in Jeff's case, I just want to send an email. We're talking about this morning a business idea like, um, do I sound cranky? Right. When I write this, does this sound cranky? Should I change the tone of this? Right. And you'll have agents is like, you sure you want to send that? It sounds very negative, or it sounds like you're in a bad state of mind. So,
I need
um,
that exact feature in my inbox today.
yeah. We used a different term than cranky, but you get the idea. Yeah.
Um,
Um, so
so
yeah, it's, your question is like, how does it, what's the new normal? I guess is really the answer. It's just, we're going to be, it's the faster that we can think of something and implement it in reality is getting closer to the speed of thought, right? When we had to transfer information in the past, we wrote it down, right, on cave walls and then on pieces of paper. And then we're now, we invented typewriters so we could do that faster. And now we're doing, instead of printing on paper, we're sending it electronically. And so it can get there faster. And now we have information at everybody's fingertips. So it's an acceleration point that we just continue to progress and reinvent. At some point, we'll basically have telepathy, right? Someone anywhere on the planet can think something and it will be in someone else's head almost instantaneously.
so does this mean for platforms it's less UI and more endpoints so that they're, more discoverable by agents and not just humans?
I think so. I honestly believe, and I've been saying this since most of my time at Alexa. One of the things that I felt was really holding back a platform like that, where you can talk to it and ask it questions and engage, is that it needed very structured, like results-driven data available. And I always talk in these big utopian terms of like, well, if I just had access to all the data, this problem wouldn't exist. Like we could just give you the answer you needed, and we could look these things up. But there's so much data hidden behind, uh, walled gardens. Some cases it's good. Some cases it makes no sense at all. But I think we're going to see more and more that there's going to be not just agents that can consume all of this information, but there's going to be a new golden age of data where people have realized that I can make my data available, and your agent that's consuming it is going to pay me, some incremental fraction of cents every time it touches my data. So yeah, of course I want to make that available to everybody. I'm going to get paid for it. Where right now it's just hiding behind a wall and no one can use it at all.
So were you gonna
I think the economics are the things to be discovered. How are we going to leverage this without wrecking the current way we perform commerce with each other? Yeah, I just saw an headline this morning that Perplexity, at some point recently, was sued by the Wall Street Journal because they had mined their articles. Like, but you published that article to the world. You're claiming it's yours, and other people can't reference it.
But see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They
Right.
put it out there, and now they're having a hissy fit because I'm not on their platform. They don't really
Right.
they don't care. And see, that's the thing. Like, I'll say it. I'm the host. I'll say it. They don't really care about the content. They care about your attention. And that is a case in point. All right. They put that out there for the world to see. But they're like, yeah, but you got to look at it on our platform. Wait, hold on. Are you putting this out there? Or you know what I'm saying? It's like now Perplexity took it. You don't
So
like that.
that goes back.
So
Yep.
was your intent to help me, or was your intent to get my attention? Well, we know what the answer to that. So that's why they're having a big problem with it. And it's kind of like, well, back to tech eating tech. It's like now it's kind of turning on you, and now all of a sudden that that the platform is, like, so. For instance, when we looked at taxi cabs in New York City, Uber ate them alive, right? Like that platform, put so many people out of business. But now the platform's like, wait, no, you can't put us out of business. It's like, well, like,
Wait a minute. Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
like it now? It's not cool,
Well,
is it,
yeah.
to become obsolete because something else is coming in your place? So that's, that is something that I'm really curious about to see how it plays out. And here comes this lawsuit, and here comes this kind of thing. That was a really great point. So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but we're watching this.
No, I don't think it's a tangent at all. I mean, I think we're both getting fired up. So attention is the currency, from YouTube to Facebook to search engine results. And now that we can delegate attention, it's not as valuable as it was before.
Right. But I think
So
there's an
people have to
interesting,
rethink their models, right?
as we stick with that tech eating tech theme though. I think there's an interesting thing to look at here. If we look way back, and it doesn't have to be that far back, pre-internet though, news was something you paid for. You either watched commercials on TV, or you purchased a newspaper or a magazine that had interesting news in it, but you paid for it. And then the internet came along and it said, forget that. Everything's free, but you're going to pay for it by, we're going to have 74 ads on the screen while you're reading that article, or we're going to pop things in front of you, whatever. And I think there's no one on earth that would say, man, I'm really happy with the state of where news is today. Right. Responsible journalism is expensive, and there's no one willing to pay for it. So we end up with, like you said, a lot of this kind of look at me kind of news stuff, where it's just trying to drum up outrage and clickbait and whatever else. And I do wonder if this continues to progress the way we're saying, right, where agents are taking a lot of that attention instead of humans, um, does it revert? Do we go back to a place where people are choosing to pay for news? Like, I want to aggregate the good stuff. I don't want all this nonsense. Go get me the real news, and I'll happily pay for it. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Would be
Yeah.
interesting.
Great point too. I mean, we look at news is about seeing history unfold, right? And again, in the old days, you were a half a day to a day behind when it happened. But with the advent of modern social media platforms, especially Twitter, you can actually hear about news as it happens. Of course, it's through the lens of somebody posting either in person or hearing it and regurgitating it, posting it. But uh, you can't pay for that now, right? It's too late. Like, there's literally somebody standing on a corner watching a war happen, and they're telling you about it as it happens, posting pictures like it. And the citizen journalism, like it's already broken that mold. So yeah, how do we get back to a world where I'm willing to pay for more valuable or more accurate information that I can trust, as opposed to just getting the live feed of it, which may be seen through a lens that we may not agree with or may not think is accurate.
Right? Because what you guys just laid out here, if I went up to someone and said, okay, here's the deal with news, you're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to have to wait for it. So I'm going to need you to be patient and have less money. No one's going to take that deal,
No,
right? Who's going to take
no.
that deal? So like the point was that, like, you had the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, et cetera. You, as a citizen without the internet, had to wait until those reporters got the story. It was filtered through that whole machine, and then eventually came out to you. And then there was the advent of the 24-hour news cycle, which is still kind of relatively new, right? You got like the evening news. Now it's like 24 hours. So it's like, so I think there's two major friction points of, like, you're going to have to pay and you're going to have to wait, but the machine is just too fast. So I'm with you, Jeff, on, like, it would be interesting if basically the agents went on and mess with the machine, and they're doing their thing, and then we human beings just, you guys have fun over there. We're going to go back out into the physical world.
Yeah,
It, you know,
yeah,
it,
which would be awesome. But my honest concern is, you look at how much energy and effort is being put into that kind of clickbait style attention grabbing. And yeah, I mean, you think about the time that people spend now, and they're always embarrassed to admit it, but the time they spend just scrolling on TikTok or whatever it happens to be. If I have more time because agents are enabling that, how are humans going to choose to spend that gained time? Is it just going to be mindlessly scrolling on stuff? Is it going to be chasing noble pursuits, right? Like, or at least just getting outside? Part of me feels like we're trending the wrong direction, because that clickbait style angle is so strong.
it's
It was designed to do that, Right. It has addicted us to a feeds. I find myself doing that. I like to think I can break away from it, but the minute I sit down and I don't have anything to do, my thumb is just scrolling upwards. Yeah. And before you know it, you've killed 45 minutes. It's the new version of going through all the channels in cable. And you go through 200 channels of cable, get to the end and there's nothing to watch. And you start over again because it's been a half an hour and the next cycle of shows is on. It's the faster, even more time wasting version of that. So
But
yeah, I think,
you're,
can we deprogram ourselves to pull away and pursue?
I think
Yeah.
those that want to can. I don't think most people give it that much thought though. Which is, if you look at the grand scheme of the population, it's not going to be winning the battle is not going to be, hey, you should stop doing that.
Right, right. Jeff, before I forget, Payman,
Yeah,
um, could we talk a little bit about, what blew your mind about their vision? Because it's my understanding it did a little bit.
sure. So I'm certainly not speaking on their behalf at all, but what I learned about this company, Payman, is that they're basically thinking about what financial transactions look like for agents, right? We talked about having an agent maybe acquire your news and pay for it, or just getting access to data that you wouldn't otherwise. And the initial question that comes up is like, am I just giving an agent access to my credit card or my bank account? That seems dangerous. There will be a whole new series of scams around how you scam an agent out of money, right? But they're really thinking about like building the infrastructure so that there is a way for you to fund agents and give them basically their own bank accounts on your behalf, that are probably more limited and restricted in how much money they have access to. But it's a really interesting concept to think about creating a bank account for an artificial intelligence agent.
So continuing that into the technical realm, Clint, um, what does the tech stack look like? You know, because of what Jeff just laid out with Payman, and
Yeah. Yeah.
are there new authentication patterns? Like, how does that like? What does that look?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly opens itself up for security holes and gaps, I think. But I think we've solved those to date pretty well. And there's still gaps, but if you build a well architected system, you can control the points of entry and the threats. But I think what it does is it makes it even more important for the authorization or the approval steps. And that could be a point where if people can replicate voices or fingerprints or other bio patterns, they can bypass an AI's limits. And let's say, for example, I love the example. It's like I've got a delegate that can buy for me no more than $100 a month. Maybe that's my how much I've given it as an allowance or as a credit limit that they can spend on my behalf. If I still need to watch that to make sure somebody's not taking that up to $99.99 every month just through some loophole.
When I
But,
first read about this, the first thing that I pictured, because I tend to go to like, what's the disaster outcome? What's the most optimistic?
right, yeah, that's the extreme. Yeah,
Yeah, I talked about like somebody scamming an agent, but honestly, what if my agent is designed to try to double my money every 30 days? So I give it $100, and its entire task is to identify and analyze the market and say, hey, here's a way I can turn 100 into 200. But it finds a Ponzi scheme. How do we mitigate that? How do we manage those things? Because now someone's running some. It's probably an agent running the Ponzi scheme too. Hey, I've got a way I can solve this problem for a
yeah,
bunch of people, right?
yeah. It's inevitable. It's going to happen without structure and without guide rails. It's going
Yeah,
to happen.
yeah, yeah. But it's definitely an interesting thought exercise, because I don't want my funds, my direct funds of my bank accounts and investment accounts. I don't want an agent having access to those at all. Um, but I do want them to be able to spend money on my behalf sometimes.
Yeah, I think I mean, we see the pattern already with cloud computing. So I can sign up for Azure, AWS, and I can set a threshold that like when my spend goes above a certain amount, you let me know. Or I could say turn it off, right? It's just flat out like to limit my risk. But in my case, like I want it to grow, but I just need to know that it's starting to get a little close to the rails. So I think those kind of patterns have already been established. They will grow and mature. And yeah, let's say you end up with hundreds of agents operating extensively or in the world you live in. Yeah, that's a lot of attention you've delegated that you're going to have to watch over.
Well, it's I mean,
We talked a little bit last episode, right? It's like you're going to build an org structure, and it's like you're running a little company. with direct reports and maybe subdirect reports, and you've got to be good at organizing that kind of work, or you're just going to have a big mess on your hands.
So I was just thinking that, like everybody becomes a movie director, because what you're describing there is a director on a movie set, a large movie set. You have people coming to you constantly asking you for a decision, this one or this one, here or there, etc. And if you don't have a vision and you don't understand how all these pieces come together, and you're just not a good director, the movie's not going to be very good. So what you laid out there, like, it's, and Jeff, you were saying, it's like, well, this really cool model where it's like, come to me and check. You do all the work of searching and you just bring me a couple options. I go, yes, that one, or no. But so it really feels like we're turning into project managed director types if you're going to engage in this personally. And then in a business respect, you also have to become, kind of a project manager director type to understand cause and effect. And like, so I wanted to talk about, you know, near term business moves. So guardrails before I forget. But then I also wanted to check in with you all for leaders that are listening right now. What do you recommend for them to be that better director? To use when they're starting to use agents and options are coming at them. How does one manage that? Because it's going to come fast, and it's sometimes, I think, easy to forget that you're the one in control.
Right.
Yeah, it almost feels like if we want to go meta with this, someone's going to invent a really good PM agent, right? That's going to be that you can delegate to say, hey, just handle all.
Yeah. I think
It's just layers on layers.
Yeah.
I think taking it to the architectural extreme. I mean, there's a reason they teach organizational design in grad school and MBA schools. And as an architect, a lot of what I do is I partition and I abstract things away. So, to organize the kinds of agents I would certainly have them partitioned into different groups. Like, this agent's responsible for finance. This agent's responsible for my social interact, and those are to be learned as we learn how these agents are. But if you just had 100 people running around doing anything you asked, you're going to have collisions of responsibility, collisions of attention span. So, that makes sense. You're going to have it organized in some way. And the better people are at organizing their trains of thought and or coordinating activities and directions and partitions, the more successful I think they'll be. Because you've probably seen that in your world too, right? A good director runs a great show, whether it's a live performance or a movie. A bad director has everybody running around just colliding with each other. It's Keystone Cop.
And then the worst directors are intentionally pitting people against one another.
Nice.
um, I
It's
guard,
reality TV right there.
yeah, right. Guardrails before we kind of impart, how to take a step into this without overcommitting. What are some guardrails that leaders can think about as they're venturing into agentic anything? What are some things to think about? Safety first, if you will.
Certainly spend. Right now, you could assign a team to go build an AI agent, and before you know it, you're spending $1,000, $2,000 a month, just because the costs aren't really bounded right now in a lot of ways, and we're all still learning how to use these things. And the pricing is cheap unless you let it get out of control. It's pennies for a million tokens, but if everybody in your company is using ChatGPT every 5 minutes, those pennies are going to add up real quick. So
Yeah,
certainly financial guardrails.
I have a friend who's actually building a company based on this concept of being able to kind of throttle and manage what's happening inside your enterprise, so that he referred to it as an AI service bus, but it's basically like there is an endpoint at which we have all the connections out to all the LLMs that we use that are external, right? The ones that cost money, and we have limits as an organization about how much we want to spend with each one of those vendors, and make sure that as we think about the applications that we're building, this one gets 30%, this one gets 20%. Like we break those things down. This throttles and manages all of that traffic through one place. So you're actually handing out API keys inside your organization to the service bus, and then the service bus is delegating the usage of those LLMs and managing all that's really
Yeah. And it becomes a vendor management problem, right? You've got agents inside your company that you've organized and give certain roles, responsibilities, but then you have connections to outside agents that they're talking to that you've got to have some level of control around that, because they can't just go out and just spend money everywhere they want, right? They need to, you'll have preferred vendors, so to speak. It's a very similar pattern to what we do now. It's just faster, less visible, and you better be watching it closely.
So for leaders listening right now who want to experiment or one mental model they can use to start exploring agentic AI without overcommitting, from both of your perspectives, what does that look like? Jeff, I'd like to maybe ask you that one first.
Sure. So they're thinking about getting started with agentic AI. I think I've used the term time leak as a term that I've used in the past. When I think about all of the things that I do as part of my job or as part of my organization's charter, we have time leaks. There are things that just consume far more time than the value they necessarily deliver, but they're necessary evils for whatever reason. And so I tend to think about, where can we shore up those time leaks? Where can we spend time thinking about agents that can handle these processes in seconds instead of minutes or days? Um, I saw an interesting quote from a friend of mine the other day, talking about using AI to generate code. And the reason that it's really difficult for developers to like pair program with AI is because AI writes code at the faster than humans think. And that's a really interesting problem, but it lends itself well to this concept of, where are we spending a majority of our time? I think that's why you see things like call centers really embracing this kind of idea, because it takes a ton of people and a ton of money to be able to staff the phones or the chats or whatever it is. And if we can do that with a smarter AI, if we can do that in a way that is compelling and not some of the early examples I've seen of chatbots, I think that there's a ton of money to be gained there that can be then doubled down and reinvested in other problems inside the business. But those time leaks tend to stand out pretty clearly to people in leadership roles as it is.
Time leaks. And then, I long for the day when I call customer service anything, and the first word out of my mouth is an agent, to try to just get a person, or hit zero or pound, to just override the whole menu. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, from what you're saying, on the horizon is a place in a space where it actually works. It works well, as good, if not better, than getting a human on the call. But it's fascinating to me, even in this day and age, good automated customer service, whether it be a chatbot or a phone, it just doesn't still. Compared to a good human being who knows what they're doing, it still pales in
Well,
comparison.
the user, and again, Alexa parallels this a lot. And one of the things that I found was, humans get frustrated when, I know if I could just talk to a person, this could be solved in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But this AI or this chatbot is making me go through 74 steps. It doesn't remember context. It doesn't understand what I'm trying to ask it for. We're not that far away from being able to understand what you're asking for and delivering on that answer. It's just whether or not that agent has the access to the context they need, the access to the data that they need to formulate an answer. And that's often just a lack of resources more than anything.
Got it.
Yeah. I love the time sink angle. I agree. If a business leader is looking to leverage AI in the organization, look at where your information workers spend time heads down that an AI could help with. The more complex your workflows, probably the more opportunity is there, because what we want humans doing is the things that they can do, which is assess the situation and make a smart decision, and then let the engines do the work to, behind the scenes that takes care of that once the decision is made, or even prep you for a decision and ask you for the decision and then take it from there. So we become much more of arbitrators and less of the grinders having to do. Let's say you take a call, right? Call centers. There's a lot of paperwork going on while that call is happening, capturing the customer, logging the incident, describing it. AI could certainly augment that, writing it up rather than have the agent have to, you call them, you hear them typing while you're talking to them, right? Which means they're only half paying attention to you because they're trying to capture it because their metrics require it. So having the AI agent take care of that so that the person on the call can truly help you and make that directed decision what to do, I think is the gain.
But I want to ask you something that I don't know if we've ever asked before. Um, what should engineering and product leaders stop doing? Not start, but stop doing, if they want to be ready for the next wave.
That's a tough one. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. What do they stop doing? Um, that's tough. That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Jeff, you have any thoughts? I have to think about that. I'll punt it over to Jeff for a second while I think about it.
The thing that stands out to me, and I mean, again, I've had about 10 seconds to think about this. Um, but the thing that stands out to me is being willing to disrupt the short term for the long term. I've talked with so many executives and folks in leadership that are in many ways beholden to their board or their shareholders, and to be able to go into a meeting and say, "Hey, for the next 18 months, it's going to be weird. We're not going to make as much money as we had, or we might even overspend. We're going to put ourselves in a different spot than we've been. But on the other side of those 18 months, we're going to double down on a lot of things. We're going to be able to reap the rewards of that." And I feel like there is a ton of very short term thinking in business without a look towards the long term. And I think that everything that we're talking about with AI is a long term play. It requires experimentation, it requires risk. No, I don't think it's massive risk, but it requires taking some risks and making some bets. And the vibe I get generally is that that's kind of frowned upon. Like, yeah, but we want this quarter to be awesome. I get that, but like you're not going to make the progress you want if you continue to just hire uh, the lowest paid employees to run your call center. Like you have a better way to do this, but you're going to need to invest in it to make it successful.
All right. So I had a time to think. I think absolutely agree with what Jeff said. I think from an engineer's mind, engineers love to be the one to solve the problem. So I think there's an element of letting your ego go and solving the problem without having to say, be satisfied that I solved the problem. Leveraging your tool to solve it and even partially implement it or fully implement it. You were the one that guided that solution. So you're just as involved in solving it as the AI was, but you didn't have to be the one that leveraged your 10 years or 20 years of experience or your schooling and, sit down and do the differential equation by hand just to remember that, I'm good at this. Right. So, and maybe that's the ego is the point that comes to mind. Is like, there's a lot of satisfaction in an engineer knowing that they did it and that they produced the outcome. And this puts a little bit of a wrinkle in that, right? I mean, and schools are facing the same problem. Like, if the AI can do the homework, why do I need to bother learning it? And teachers are like, well, why do I have to teach it if it's the calculator argument all over again? Like, why do I have to teach how to do hand division if a calculator will do it when I'm grown up? Yeah. So it's changing and inverting a lot of engineers' minds. And I've got engineers that have stayed away from it because they could have absolutely done their job faster and better, but they wanted to be the ones doing their job, right? Slinging that code, writing it and compiling it and checking it. There's a lot of satisfaction from writing code, compiling it, checking in, and going home at night knowing you did it. And that's one of the big addiction feeds that you get from writing code is that you know that you did it and you did it well.
Mm. Before we close here, is there anything either of you would like to impart to the audience before we wrap?
It's coming.
Yeah,
You have to embrace it.
I think with a lot of technology, it's been easy to avoid it. I still know, at this point, they're seniors, 70s, 80s, that have just never embraced the cell phone culture. That's just something I'm not going to participate in. I'm not interested. And I think as we look at a lot of the technologies that have existed in our lives, you had the option to dodge it. Like there's lots of people that are like, I don't play video games. I don't own a console. Like it's not a thing, even though that's a huge part of our culture and what happens there. Um, I don't think you're going to get that luxury with AI. It's going to be a part of your life, whether or not you want it to be. It's going to be all encompassing, right? You're going to walk into Home Depot and it's going to say, "Hey Jeff, welcome. Hammers are in aisle 7." And it knows that because I was at home and was talking with my wife or my agent, and I said, "Hey, I got to go get a hammer." Um, that kind of stuff's going to happen, and it's going to be in a place where you need to be aware of how it's working and where your data is and where it's being shared. Um, but you're not going to get a choice not to participate. I don't think.
Jeff, to play devil's advocate here, I feel like you can't afford to not pay attention to this has always been the battle cry of any sort of tech or any sort of platform. But it really feels like this time it's true. It's different. Like most anybody is not going to be able to just dodge this without getting replaced or out competed or anything like that. Do you really feel like this is a different time and a different space?
I do. I mean, going back to that call center thing that we've been iterating through a few times. There was a time where you would just say, "No, I just want to talk to a person." But what we're going to find pretty quickly is there isn't a person. That whole company is run by one guy, and he's got agents doing all of these kinds of tasks. There is not a person to talk to. And the cost of a person, regardless of where you are in the world, is going to be higher than the cost of running thousands of those agents. So it makes no sense at all. And I think that's where people kind of buck and thrash against technology is like, yeah, but I could do it faster if I could just do this thing, or if I could just talk to that person, or if I could get the manager at the store. But like, those things don't exist anymore. You're going to stores still? Like, your agents don't shop for you, right? Like, those are the kinds of questions that we're going to start hearing.
Yeah.
I think we will still go through a technology adoption curve, just like we do with every paradigm shift. And I mean, there's still people that I know that still get a new hand delivered newspaper and still sit for 2 hours and read it. And they will be the laggards at the very end of the tail. So they will still exist 10 years from now. I do think this one is going to happen pretty fast. I think we learned from the mobile cell phone generation. We learned from the internet generation, and the innovative spark, especially in the United States, to capitalize on new things quickly. The first movers clearly get an advantage, can build billion-dollar companies. That's going to happen. I think this one's even faster. We see multiple companies spending billions and billions, and they just that feeds into the kind of culture we have here in the U.S. in particular. But there will still be laggards. But yeah, they're going to be left in the dust. They really are.
Thankfully, it's accessible, and it will only become more accessible. So those that are laggards and those that are hesitant to participate, the more time they wait, the easier it's going to be to use.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting concept, that it doesn't pay to be does it pay to be a first mover though? Still, because
It
user
depends on
early
whether,
adoption has its advantages, right? But it's not.
it depends on whether you're profit driven. If you want to
Yeah.
if you want to advance your career or create a business, now is the time. If you are just an unwilling participant in the AI ecosystem, waiting is fine. It just means that, you are going to look like a caveman in a time of modern era.
Brilliant. Jeff Blankenburg, you have a Future of People talk that people can check out, yes?
Yeah. You can find that on YouTube. If you look for Future of People and my name, you'll find it.
Brilliant. And Clint always appreciates uh, connection and communication on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with either of these folks, they're both on LinkedIn, of course. And if you're building something ambitious, reach out to Team Ascendle. Thanks for tuning in, as always, to this episode of Ascendle Unscripted.